Hello and welcome to the 28th edition of the Cinelit podcast. Over the last few months, we have been taking a trip down memory lane, looking at some of the films of Oscars past in our Oscar Rewind season. We've tackled stellar, outstanding years like 1976 and 1994. We've been rubbing shoulders with the glitterati and films that will stand the test of time. But now we thought it was time to get down and dirty in the gutters of Hollywood and explore some of the worst movies of all time. Yesterday, we are looking at the history of the Golden Raspberry Awards, better known as the Razzies. My name is Adam Marsh, and as ever, I am joined by Cinelit's resident expert, Daryl Buxton. Hello, Daryl. How are you?
Hi, Adam. I'm good, thanks. I'm really looking forward to this because we've been talking about some great movies recently, and what a chance to talk about some rubbish ones. So.
And to help us in our task, however, we have brought in some ringers. We are delighted to welcome onto the show Johan and Edward from the excellent Trash Tapes podcast. How are you guys?
Honoured to be here.
So excited! I am so excited to be here. This is my wheelhouse. This is what I've been built to do. So dead ready to go through the long list that I have here. It's long. It's quite big. It's like several pages. So
he's made notes, folks. We've just been shown the notebook. So.
Do you want to just talk about a little bit what you guys do on your Trash Tapes, Jack? Because from what it looks like, it sounds like it's Johan forcing Edward to watch loads of really bad movies.
That is exactly what it is, basically. So yeah, I am the host of the Trash Tapes podcast, where I purposely go around, try and find infamously bad films, cult movies, really obscure stuff, and then I just throw it over to Edward and say, "Hey, watch it. We need to talk about this." And most of the time, he enjoys it. There's some which he absolutely hates, and I revel in that. But yeah, it's now evolved a bit. It feels like sometimes it's equal pegging. Sometimes it's like learning, like almost like a sensei, just learning, getting the apprentice now comes over and say, "I found this sensei," and it's like, "Oh my goodness, this is great." So he's learning now from me. So he's evolved.
The student has become the teacher.
Yeah, definitely. I started out with like pretty much no knowledge of bad movies, and now I am literally the Luke Skywalker of bad movies.
It's impressive. It's very impressive.
And Luke's made a few as well, so
yeah.
But
okay, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the individual films, what are you guys' thoughts on the very existence of the Razzies? I guess. I mean, does the world deserve an award ceremony for bad movies?
I think yes. I think it actually does. I feel like the way the Razzies are done, realistically, I like what it's trying to do, which is put a mirror up at like the Oscars and the Golden Globes and say, hey, look at you. These movies aren't that great. So what we're going to do, we're going to show you all the rubbish ones you've done throughout the year. Hollywood has not been great the entire year, and it's good. I like the concept of that. But as the years have gone on, I feel like it's not. I think it's now just become very cheap a little bit. I think it could have been a bit more angsty, a little bit more punky, I guess. But it's now just an excuse to say like Madonna's terrible, for example, or how no one likes John Travolta. So it's kind of become just a bit mean, really.
I mean, I would say that anyone who actually is a fan of bad movies would definitely put different movies up in a competition, like in an award ceremony for bad movies, because you know, there are so many great cult movies that are bad movies that should be celebrated, in my opinion.
But that's the thing. Is the Razzie supposed to be celebrated? Or is it just saying like, hey, these movies are rubbish? And so if they're supposed to be celebrated, then we would have things like The Room, for example, be nominated, or we have some very infamously terrible B movies that would be on there, but they're not, because they're not celebrated.
I think The Room's a great example of what the Razzies get wrong, because they when they're sort of doing their nominations, they tend to focus on, you mentioned Madonna and John Travolta and so on. If you look back at the history of the Razzies, that used to be Bo Derek and Pia Zadora, who are sort of forgotten now, you know. But there's always these personalities that are in the media that get focused on as, oh, if they're in a film, it must be bad, you know. And in focusing on that sort of thing, and in focusing on the stuff that gets press attention, they tend to overlook the things that sort of sneak in under the radar, like The Room. And it's only years later that they sort of pick up on those. And if they do like a sort of retrospective award, they might give it to something like that. But yeah, it does seem to be this sort of cult of personality thing in reverse that works often for the Razzies. It was interesting that they started in 1980, because that was the year that the Medved brothers published their infamous Golden Turkey Awards book. So there's a nice dovetail there. So the Medveds did their book on the history of bad films up to 1980, and then suddenly the Razzies guys come along and they're sort of almost taking the baton and telling us about the future, you know.
I find it an interesting one, whereas like, if it truly wanted to be a bad movie award, it probably wouldn't have lasted the test of time like it has and become gone into public awareness as the Razzies, because bad movies, properly bad movies, are incredibly dull. You know, they're terrible movies. You don't want to watch those movies.
Yeah, this is all about fun bad movies, isn't
That's
it?
right. And I think sometimes with this award, it's quite schizophrenic. And sometimes it gets that, and it nominates the movies that are bad but fun to watch. And you're sitting there thinking, what are they thinking when they're making this movie? And then you watch it, and then they'll go for a few years where they just nominate bad Adam Sandler movies or something like that, where it's just like, well, we know what they were thinking. They were thinking they were making a comedy. It's just not very funny or whatever, you know.
Yeah, this is what I was saying. Eventually leads to what's considered to be easy targets. And the problem is, then it gets to a moment, I think they got an award on this, which I believe is the Razzie Redeemer Award.
Yeah.
Where basically it's like, oh, you've actually done a good job. Congratulations. You no longer need a Razzie anymore. We've kind of revoked it.
Eddie Murphy's made a good movie. Yeah.
Because, yes, this is especially for the ones they've poked fun on for like nearly a decade. And then they pull off one good movie and say, oh, you're fine now. And it's like, that's not fair. That's really bad bullying, you know?
Well, that's basically what this is, isn't it? It's just a decades-long bullying of Hollywood A-listers.
But there are, I would say, as we go through the years, I can go over and say, yeah, some of these are justified. Yeah, that is actually pretty bad what they've come up with. It's just that now people forget the ones which are legitimately like bad and just pick the ones that they poke fun of, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's get into it then. We'll take these in sort of like 5 or 6 year chunks rather than burrowing down to we'll be here longer than we need to be talking about bad movies, really. But so if we look at the first like 80 to 1985, we've got and focusing mainly around the worst picture films, because and then we can spin off if anything interesting outside of that. But we start with 10 nominees in the first year in 1980, which they very, very quickly rounded back down to 5 in 81, and there have been 5 ever since. Oscars take note. So they started off in 1980, where we had we had a Village People musical winning worst movie of 1980 with Can't Stop the Music, a movie I hadn't seen before. So I watched that this week and rectified that, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. However, it is like a really bad British sex movie, sex comedy. So it's like a Carry On movie or a Confessions of movie, where it's not that funny and it's not that sexy. And it kind of just goes along at a pace. The thing that really stood out for me in why this movie wasn't a success, more than anything else, whether the backlash towards the Village People was kicking in by that point, possibly, you know, they'd had their moment, their 5 minutes, etc. But for me, it was more the case of that this movie's 20 minutes into the film, we've had 2 musical numbers in a Village People musical, and neither of them are by the Village People.
Yeah,
which feels to me is a terrible mistake.
Yeah. Although Adam, the film is an ambitious 2 hours long, so they've got time to feel that out. I mean, you're touching all my bases there by comparing it to a British sex comedy, because as you know, I love those. And what I would say, this does the classic thing that pop music films do. They're always 3 years too late, you know, because of the time it takes the film business to sort of respond to anything and to actually go into production and get things rolling and hire a director and get a script written. By the time it's all done and the cameras are rolling, Nobody knows who the Village People are. Nobody wants to see a movie about them. Now, in 1980, that was big news because it's like, why are they making a film about this phenomenon from 2 years ago? You know, but you watch it now and it's got that, you forget all that, and it's got that sort of nostalgic thing. It's like what we said about Spaceballs the other week. When Spaceballs came out, it was, why are they doing a Star Wars spoof 10 years too late? Has Mel Brooks lost it? You know, but you watch it now and you just think, oh, it's a great Star Wars parody, brilliant. You forget that time lag. And what I would say in defence of Can't Stop the Music, I love it as well.
Go on.
And I would say two things. The best picture winner at the Oscars that year was Robert Redford's Ordinary People. Now, that hasn't got Valerie Perrine wearing a T-shirt that says "Macho Woman" on it, and it's got nothing like my favourite scene in Can't Stop the Music, which is the one where Glenn Hughes, with his massive handlebar moustache and all his leather gear and his big bike, tools up at the finance office, gets off his bike. We think he's going in for the audition to join Village People, and he reveals that he's there to talk about his tax returns, and he doesn't know anything about the band, and then proceeds to stand on the piano and sing Danny Boy. Ordinary People, you cannot compete with that.
Yeah, that is true. But I will throw something in there. Speaking of things that are completely out of trend, and they made a movie out of it. I need to talk about Xanadu, okay? Because speaking of other terrible musical movies, in that same year, by the sound of things as well, Xanadu is special to me because it is so misjudged and doesn't understand what it's trying to do. Because this is supposed to have been the Olivia Newton-John's kind of like big grand opus thing. This is my big solo project, right?
Yeah, the post Grease film. Yeah.
Yes. Also, this was Gene Kelly's technically last movie, which is such a sad thing to think about. And also it's the fact that it's so misjudged because it's a movie about disco when disco died, right? Disco was dead by 1980. Everyone's moved on from disco. And the whole point of the movie is there is a Greek muse who goes down to Earth to help an artist open a roller disco. It is so mishmashly random. And I think it's because it's so random that I love it to bits, because it feels like literally like someone's trying to make a jigsaw puzzle out of 7 different jigsaw puzzles and trying to make something that looks good. And the reason, and it's also very campy. And I think this, for me, is the pinnacle of what I think of when I think of the Razzies properly. It's a movie that is misjudged, makes absolutely no sense on its own, has dated itself terribly, but for some reason, in that datedness, it has gone round full circle and has just become glorious again.
I think for me, one of those things that is, I want to like Xanadu more than I actually do. I'm watching, I'm thinking, this is right on my street. I'm relatively newly discovered love of musicals. I'm well into Gene Kelly. I love Gene Kelly. I think the look with all the sort of like neon and disco style, almost like synth. You know, it's like if it was like a synth film instead of a disco film, people would be all over this. It'd be like, oh, it's got visuals of like a synth wave style thing. It's got all those things I really love. But it's just so boring. It's just so dull. And that's the worst thing about it. It's like unforgivably dull.
And again, it's slightly the misjudged thing, which I kind of find funny. I look back at it now and it's like the musical numbers are, half the musical numbers are done in one long take. Like they don't cut. And like the director, Robert Greenwood, I believe it is, he basically just didn't know how to shoot a dance number. The last 20 minutes of the movie, though, which is just a giant musical number, is flipping awesome. There's all the kinds of dancing and everything else is there. It's just an hour and 20 minutes beforehand.
Yeah. So you've got Gene Kelly actually on set, and nobody thought of inviting one of the greatest dance directors of all time to actually get behind the camera and tell them how to do it.
Nope.
No, but it does start a trend of what the early Razzie years were about: music, musicals. They don't really like them. I think maybe they're out of fashion, so therefore they're fighting to get any musical made in that period.
Yeah, well, Annie got nominated in 1982 as well. So yeah. So it is that sort of stage show. Let's put the show on right here, sort of thing. That old 1940s plot sort of came back around 1980, and the Razzies didn't like it. It was prime for them to sort of have a go at. Yeah.
Yeah, and we had the pirate movie as well from 82. Pirates of Penzance thing.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
So, you know, they really don't like musicals. So, and that comes through strongly in this first few years. You've got Can't Stop the Music, which has two great lines in it, at least two great lines in it, with the sort of the where they try and do the ad campaign where she says, "I want to make milk as glamorous as champagne." It's a great line. I love that. And then obviously Glenn Hughes, we've already singled him out, but getting nervous before going on stage in San Francisco. Leathermen don't get nervous. Leathermen don't get nervous. Great line.
He steals the show. I mean, you were talking about Village People not coming on for the first 20 minutes. He doesn't come on until about after halfway through the movie, and then absolutely steals the show. You know, every line's a zinger. So
we also got the first appearance of Bo Derek in 1981 with Tarzan, the Ape Man. And they nominate and renominate and renominate and renominate Bo Derek repeatedly.
Well, she was in that sense, she was the John Travolta of that era.
Oh, it's so bad we're poking fun of even these people already. It's so unfair.
Well, you know, I mean, a lot of these movies that we're talking about now get labelled under the banner of vanity projects. Now, sometimes you go, it's a vanity project, as if that's immediately a bad thing. And often,
but that was Bo's whole career, though.
Exactly,
was vanity.
Just casting his wife in various states of undress throughout the 80s. That was his thing. So, moving on to 1982, it's an interesting one. Inchon won Best Film. Now, it's a movie I've not seen, but remarkably, it's a movie that's never been released on home video.
Yeah.
DVD or VHS. It's that bad. It never, ever got a release on VHS.
Yeah. Aren't there some kind of issues with that where it's all sort of tied up in sort of legal business or something? I've not researched it enough to know, but I at the back of my mind, I think there's something about it that
probably is, Daryl. I prefer my angle that it's so bad that
I'm going to run with it.
I think it's a bit of both. Yeah. They're using the legal stuff as an excuse.
I think one of the things I'm just looking at the Wikipedia now. And literally, one of the first things I've noticed is that after its release, it was never seen again. Basically, it basically says after it was never shown again in cinemas and was never released on video cassette or DVD. Wow.
I know, it's crazy. It has had some television screenings, so there are versions out there in the world of it. So it's not like a hidden movie or a lost movie. In that
you can see it if you want to, but who wants
really?
To? Yeah. And then moving on to like 1983, Pia Zadora finally wins, nominated the previous year. They finally get the knife in and finally land it in the back. But we also got the first appearance of a company that I thought would be all over these awards throughout the 1980s, and that's Cannon Films. Yeah, first appearance of Hercules in from Cannon Films. You know, Hercules, the one where he throws a bear into space. You know, that kind of great movie. So yeah, but I just think Cannon made a string of terrible movies. You know, that was basically their thing. They made bad movies, rushed movies, ill-judged movies, and you know. So I figured they'd be all over, but they're not really. I mean,
if you look down the list, I think what happened there is they nominated them in '83. They won or if you can call it winning, I don't know what the term is for the Razzies, but they won the Worst Picture Award in '84 with another Bo Derek film, Bolero, and maybe it was like you know, we've sort of done Cannon now, you know, we'll leave them alone, and again missing out on those sort of primo years when they were just turning out these dreadful action movies, one after the other, and all the great films that we've seen clips of in the Canon documentary and so on. But yeah, maybe the Razzies thought, oh, we've done it. We've nominated them one year, we've given them the award the next. That's.
I think one thing I'll throw into that argument is that the ones with the Canon movies are also part of a bigger company. Like they kind of made it, but they were distributed by MGM.
Yeah, they're sort of cross-pollinated.
So because it's based off a bigger studio, they can go and say, oh, we can mock that. We're not going to mock the small indie guys because that's just unfair. Let's mock the big boys. And so if it's somewhat connected to a bigger studio, they feel less guilty. Although the one that Bo Derek won, that was just pure canon. So basically, they just really don't like Bo Derek.
But they're not particularly typical of Canon's output. You know, it's not Bo Derek meets Chuck Norris, is it? So. Well, I'd pay to see that. But
Paul Derek as a hostage on a plane being saved by a group of mercenaries, soldiers of fortune. There we go. Yeah, that'd be great. 1985, Missing in Action 4. Great. But yeah, there's a few interesting things we get around this period. Burt Reynolds was having a struggling time at the box office that period, and the smoky magic started to peter out here, and we got Stroker Ace.
Now this is prime stuff for the Razzies. It's someone who has been up at the top of the box office, the top of Hollywood, and when they're on the slide, they slide down onto this list right here.
It's basically they just like kicking someone when they're down. It's like I said, it's really mean when you say it like that, but it is.
It's true.
Oh, it is definitely punching down. As a sort of, they are punching down at these people. You made a terrible movie. You should be bad. Well, here's a little dig in the ribs for you as well, just to round it off. So that's. I mean, obviously, then Cannonball Run 2 gets criminally nominated the following year. I love Cannonball movie. And we get Rhinestone. And we've got to talk about Rhinestone. And now this is the movie that Sylvester Stallone turned A Romance in the Stone and Beverly Hills Cop, passed on both of those movies. Did Rhinestone and Cobra instead over the next couple of years,
Cobra also got nominated as well.
Exactly, yeah. So
in that golden year of '86.
Ed, we're speaking of Cobra quick before we go there. Ed, we did an episode of that, didn't we? And,
Cobra is one of my favorite movies, and it's a weird kind of movie because it's like it is canon. But it's also Warner Brothers, isn't it? And it's kind of like, it's a shame that it's canon in a way, because it's kind of, there's no canon logo on it. And I really wanted to do this movie on the podcast, and I was pushing it to Johan for ages.
You did.
Yeah.
And then as I researched it, I kind of realized that this is literally Sylvester Stallone having the biggest ego trip in the history of ego trips, where the entire ending of a movie was changed because there was a mosquito problem on set. And so he said, we got to leave this entire place to film somewhere else because I don't want to get hit by a mosquito. This is why I'm saying that I understand why some of these movies are nominated if you really delve deep into its production, because that is horrendous.
You look at this and so Stallone, why did you turn down those two amazing movies and take the $5 million paycheck for Rhinestone? Gee, let me think. I think during that time, money was ruling, and his ego was way out of control at that point.
Yeah. But speaking of Sylvester Stallone, the following year, 1985, I'm going to put this criminal what they've done here, because
they laid the boot in now. They've got their target, and they go for him in big style, don't they?
With Rambo Part 2 and Rocky 4.
Rocky 4, yeah.
The two, arguably by fans, two of the best ones.
Yeah.
Rambo 2, interestingly, was, I think, the first winner of the worst film that was actually a box office hit. That wasn't a movie that had flopped at the box office and they were going, oh yeah, Bo Derek stripping for a husband on a movie, kicking a boot in, It's not Xanadu or Can't Stop the Music. It's a movie that was a massive box office hit.
Yeah, so it's a major shift. Yeah.
So that switched. I mean, maybe that's what increased the popularity of the Razzies around that period. Maybe taking aim at a bigger target, a movie that was popular.
Yeah. if we move on sort of into the mid 80s and through to the early 90s, then, and 86 is your year, Adam. We've talked about Cobra, but you talk about the two winners in 86.
Go on, you, because I heard you like these two, and I want your defense.
I don't know whether I have a defense, but I think Howard the Duck is one of the greatest 80s movies of all time. In the sense of that it embodies the 80s in its running time, in the sense of like, what Hollywood just doesn't know what they're doing anymore. They don't know how to make hits. They're throwing everything at the wall and seeing what hits. So someone comes in, I want to make a movie about a 4-foot duck that gets plucked from another universe and brought to Cleveland. Oh, yeah, it'd be great. Let's do that. Who knows? Who knows what's hits? They just don't know what's a hit anymore. They don't know what's going to land. You've got Ghostbusters being a big hit, but then Buckaroo Banzai wasn't a big hit. You know, you have all these movies where the pitching sessions, the executives at Hollywood don't know what they're doing. So,
and you just don't know what the audiences are going to respond to in a mass way either. So.
Exactly, yeah. So you get, you know, why was Howard the Duck a flop, but E.T. was a hit?
Well, one of them doesn't have duck boobs, so that's why.
I was just going to say duck boobs, but you beat me to it.
I don't know why that's not a plus. Isn't that in a plus column? We're talking pros and cons. That's a pro, isn't it? Duck boobs.
But okay, well,
for me, it's more a case of like, Howard the Duck is not as bad a movie as people make it out to be. It's a coherent movie. It's quirky as hell, and it's very 80s. I mean, it's supposed to be for kids. I think it's supposed to be for kids, but he gets a job in a brothel. It's got duck boobs in it. You know, it's got very unusual adult tendencies. And obviously, coming from the source material of the comics, which were definitely skewed older, and then the movie was made by Lucasfilm, which were making younger skewing films. It had that weird dynamic where you don't know whether it's who is the audience other than me. Who is the audience for this movie? You know, who loves this movie?
I think tonally it reminds me of the 90s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, because it's got the similar kind of costumes with like limitation, like the animatronic costumes, got similar sort of technology involved. And also, it doesn't know who its audience is, because it's quite the Turtles movie was quite violent, wasn't it? And not really for kids in a way. And it's the same kind of like parallels, in my opinion.
I think there's one.
So Edward, you're saying that Howard the Duck is ahead of its time, then?
Definitely, yes.
Wow, talk about spin. I think there's a big difference between is that this Turtles was a massive hit.
Yeah,
it was a massive.
Well,
because it's Turtles.
Who knew?
And I think one of those things where with Howard is like, it felt more like George Lucas has had too much success, so we're going to go for him now. And
this is the year we kick him. Yeah,
this is the year we give him a kicking, and that's I guess that's why it became the worst movie of all time.
Now what makes 86 your big year, Adam, is it's the first year that the Razzies have a joint winner, and the other film is also one of yours.
It is. I'm a huge Prince fan, and I am, for honour of the day, I am wearing my Under the Cherry Moon t-shirt for this. So, but yeah, Under the Cherry Moon, Prince's follow-up to the mega success of Purple Rain. You know, Prince in 1984 had the #1 single, the #1 album, and the #1 movie in the same weekend. That's a massive hit. The movie sold ridiculous amounts of money. The album sold tons, and it established Prince as a megastar. Scroll forward a couple of years, and then this is where I was talking about vanity projects. Purple Rain, in many ways, is a vanity project. It's Prince trying to establish himself as a megastar and taking control over pretty much every area of music, production, acting, everything. He's in control of it to get his vision of who he wants the public to see as him, to cross over from the black music radio stations of the early 80s, where he was ghettoized there, cross over into the mainstream. He's already had a big hit album with 1999. Now is the time to really cross over. And it's a massive vanity project. The acting's a bit iffy, but the music performances are so stellar that it gets through. I mean, it's like 45 minutes of music in a 90-minute movie, you know, Purple Rain. So it kind of gets through the sort of like iffy acting. Because of the power of the performance. Well, for me, I think the power of Prince is on stage, because it's on stage. It's not like incidental music or him recording in the recording studio. It's him performing, and that's what gripped people. That's what people wanted to see. They saw this megastar on screen, and they bought in. They bought in big. And then you go forward a couple of years to Under the Cherry Moon, and then you get another vanity project, and it's the bad side of vanity projects, I guess. Whereas this movie, you're sitting there thinking, Prince has made this movie for himself. There's no, I want to cross over into a bigger area. I'm making a black and white movie.
Yeah, it's black and white period.
Flat bang in the middle of the MTV period. Colour and fast edit. He's making a homage to a 1930s Bob Hope buddy movie. You know, it's an odd decision. Obviously, he loves those kind of movies, and that's why he's making it. But it's not a great film.
I'm glad you at least admitted it's not a great movie.
It's not a great movie, but equally, that said, the soundtrack's amazing, and the soundtrack gets nominated for worst Razzies, and it's like, come on.
That's wrong.
I understand
that isn't fair.
You're having a pop of Prince now, but you're nominating the soundtrack.
Yeah, I think it's just say, we've nominated him for the movie. We might as well put the soundtrack in there to give it a full package situation.
I think that's it. Yeah.
So we get into another chunk of years. Now this is I guess this is the full on 80s blockbuster years, where we're looking at 87 through to the early 90s, I guess, where we're getting.
Yeah. We've done the two Oscar podcasts recently where we picked 1976 and 1994 as examples of two stellar years at the Oscars. And we've almost got the Razzie equivalent in 87, because we've got Tough Guys Don't Dance, Who's That Girl?, Jaws the Revenge, Ishtar, and they were all beaten by Leonard Part 6. So there's a golden year of bad movies for you. Any one of those might have won the Razzie in another year, but here they are all nominated together. I'm
very surprised that Jaws Revenge didn't win, because, you know, this time it was personal. Right, like it was personal. I'm thinking, like, oh no, the sharks can't actually do it's personal this time. Oh God, why has that not won? But still, it's
the competition was just too tough. I think. You know what a year! What a year! Were there any good films in 87? I wonder, because there's none on here.
Let's move on from that year, shall we then?
Well, yeah, it was definitely Miami Connection, Johan, in 87.
It was Miami Connection. Was that? Yeah, that's a classic, but that would never be nominated.
See the light of day for another 20 years, though, did it? So
that's the problem. A lot of the movies that we would think that would be perfect if anyone actually cared. Or it was done by a bigger studio. Yeah, 100%. That Miami Connection would have been there, would have been a legacy that's now would have been more than that, but it's not the case here. But I'm looking more into the next year, because 1988, we've got one movie that we just covered in the episode of the podcast that I think we need to talk about. I'm
assuming that's Mac and Me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we get up to Mac and Me, the winner of this year's is the first is Cocktail, starring Tom Cruise. Now, when I went in this just thinking blindly, I figured, well, the way that they go for big stars and they nominate big stars and they have a good pop, I figured Tom Cruise would be all over this.
No,
but he's not. This is like literally his only nomination.
Yeah, you'd think his ego would be perfect for Razzie attention.
Yeah,
maybe he's managed his career so well.
Yeah, maybe they can only go after one Scientologist, and they've gone for Travolta.
Oh no, I think this was the time anyway that Tom Cruise wasn't really doing like the big ego thing. He only became the big ego thing like by the late 90s, early noughties, where he's now jumping on the couch kind of thing. So before then, I think it was like, oh look, he's done one. He's fine. We like Tom Cruise. He's fine. He's all right. Wait, let's see if he does another one. And he never does another one, really. And it's not another one that's suitable for this list. So
no, absolutely. So okay, let's get on to Mac and Me then.
I think Ed needs to talk about this because he had nearly a mental breakdown in the episode. Like he gave me chills, which was so exciting as the host of the show.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about this, if you look at the wins for this film, it's like director and like Ronald McDonald. I'm sure as an actor. And I think that's not really fair, because as we discovered in our podcast, the real kind of villain in this movie was the producer, wasn't it, Johan?
Yeah, R.J. Lewis. He's the bad guy in this movie. Not Ronald McDonald, but they used Ronald McDonald as sort of like the scapegoat. It's like, no, it wasn't him. McDonald is the problem. Who's the spokesperson?
Yeah, the director was just brought in, like, you know, as a job. Like, we need a director, just like you'll do, kind of thing. And he got the win.
Sad.
Well, you know, it was a greedy is good year. You know, win Wall Street, win the best Oscar that year.
Yeah.
So you know,
perfect counterbalance.
Yeah, exactly, perfect counterbalance. So, but yeah, I've not seen the film. I thought I had, but I don't think I have. But I can see why it was made. You know, in the middle of Gremlins, boom.
It's true. I honestly, I wouldn't recommend it unless you are very ready to have your childhood destroyed.
No, I'm fine with it. So again, we plow through. We get another Stallone nomination with Lock Up. We get Karate Kid 3 and Star Trek 5 nominated. We also get Roadhouse in 1989. One of my favorite bad movies. Just a ridiculous movie that everyone should try and see, and it's a lot of fun. That for me is one of those movies that probably should win. As much as I love it, you know, it should win because it's a bit naff, it's ridiculous, and it's got some ridiculous moments. He pulls a man's throat out with his fist. You know, it's like he has sex on really uncomfortable rocks in this movie. You know, it's just very uncomfortable sex scene in it as well. It's just odd. It's an odd movie, and which for me is perfect. It's perfect for a trash movie. You think, what the hell are they thinking?
I think we don't need anything to add to Roadhouse. Roadhouse is perfect.
Yeah, Roadhouse is perfect. Never were those words spoken before.
Into the 90s, we've got Prince again nominated for Graffiti Bridge, but we've got Bo Derek still winning it. So
Bo Derek,
after all these years, she's still in there. So she's like the Meryl Streep of bad movies.
Oh, that's so sad. Poor her.
Yeah, this was a finale in the nominations, though. This is the last time she was nominated and won. But again, another dual winner that year for Best Picture. Worst Picture.
With the Adventures of Ford Fairlane.
Yes, The Adventures of Ford Fairlane, which I watched recently.
I've never heard of it before. How is it?
This is Andrew Dice Clay's star vehicle, I guess, is the way of looking. Andrew Dice Clay, the very famous rock star comedian of the late 80s, got his break on he'd been doing stand-up routines for years. Got his big break on the Rodney Dangerfield HBO special, Nothing Goes Right, where he shared this. Rodney Dangerfield brings on a bunch of comedians from his comedy club in New York and gives them 8 minutes to shine, basically. A very successful series of comedy specials in the 80s. This comedy special had Andrew Dice Clay in his sort of like misogynistic style comedian character. And you had Bill Hicks on the same bill, which is like you couldn't get two more diametrically opposed comedians or visions of what comedy is on the same stage. Both of them went on to have big success. Dice Clay in 89 sold 500,000 copies of his comedy album.
Wow.
So he was a megastar. He got banned from MTV. He did 3-minute set on the MTV Movie Awards and then was banned from MTV until 2011.
Wow.
So he was quite outrageous. He was going to appear on Saturday Night Live, and one of the cast members refused to perform alongside him because of his sexism. And Sinead O'Connor pulled out from performing on that same episode. So he was fairly controversial, but massively popular at that time as well. Yeah. And this movie is one of those movies where I wish. It's right up my street. I love these kind of like detective movies, 80s detective movies where, you know, it's got a quirk. So he's a rock and roll detective. He investigates crimes along the music press or with rock stars or soul singers or whatever. And everything about this movie is great, apart from him. Take him out of the movie and his character, the sort of like the sexist or misogynistic character out of the movie and plug in literally anybody else in that role and then change the character to fit them, it would be a 10 times better movie. It's got some great cameos from some of those people that we love seeing in movies. It's got David Patrick Kelly from The Warriors in it, and Twin Peaks. It's got Gilbert Gottfried in it, who's great in it. It was also nominated for the worst supporting actor in this movie. It's got, to continue the Prince connection, it's got Morris Day and Sheila E. in there, and it's got Robert Englund doing the thickest English accent you can find. For a reason I have no idea why. He's just doing it. And he's like full on villain mode. And you have Ed O'Neill playing a disco police detective.
That's amazing. Just disco police detective. Well done.
Yeah, who's got a grudge against Ford Fairlane because he ruined his disco career. So there you go. I mean, as I'm talking, it sounds great. But he's so horrible in the lead. He's just so horrible. It's just like, because obviously they work in bits of his routines, and it's so. It was bad at the time, but now it stands out like a frigging sore thumb. You know, it's literally horribly sexist comedy. Yeah, it's not good at all. I've already talked way too longer on this movie than I should have.
I feel like, as a curiosity, I need to see this, but I'm not sure whether it's a good idea or not. So I'll put that in the back burner of my DVD collection.
It's got some interesting bits. I mean, it's funny. One of the screenwriters, Daniel Walters, he's a double Razzie winner. He won the Razzie for script writing this film and Hudson Hawk.
Well, Adam, you keep mentioning Hudson Hawk, so I've got to talk about Hudson Hawk.
Yeah.
I mean, this is another passion project movie for Bruce Willis. And he's really trying to show off his musical side in Hudson Hawk. Because I don't think people really took his music seriously, did they? He really wanted to be a musician, I think. But he kind of like slotted that into this movie. But he's like a master cat burglar, isn't he? That like synchronizes his exploits by sort of memorable songs like Swinging on the Star by Bing Crosby. And you'd think that'd be enough for a movie as a concept, but you've got like conspiracy theories in there. You've got like secret societies. You've got like clock punk technology in there. There's just too much in that movie. It's crazy.
This is an interesting one. Have you guys read the Richard E. Grant's diaries with Nails?
No, I haven't.
You should read that now, because it's basically his on-set diaries from every movie he did from 87 through to the mid-90s when he published it. And he does a whole section on Hudson Hawk, which is absolutely fascinating on how a movie can go wrong, basically, where you have a movie star of Bruce Willis's level at that time, you know, coming off two Die Hard movies, like Look Who's Talking movies were a big hit. You know, he was a fairly big name at that time. I have lots of clout. And then you had a megastar movie producer of Joel Silver. Yeah. And then you had poor director Michael Lehman in between of Heather's fame, in between the two, trying to mediate the two massive influences. And you get all manner of craziness in this movie.
Yeah, it sounds like with Hudson Hawk, it is another one. Again, another vanity project. This is Bruce Willis trying to say, hey, do you remember the time I was a musician? Do you remember that album I did a while ago? Do you remember that? Well, I really like that more. I really like that, and I want you guys to remember it. So I'm going to do my singing. I'm making this a musical number in a weird situation, but also, yeah, it's also a weird conspiracy action movie with a very creepy pair of siblings, which I'm not going to get into. Yeah, it's clashing of heads again.
I think also you got to think about it, like Bruce Willis at that time. He'd had Die Hard as a big hit. Yeah. But he wasn't necessarily known as being an action star. You know, he'd done Die Hard, massive hit, done Die Hard 2 in a sequel, but he'd done Moonlighting and Blind Date as well, and they were both hits. Yeah. So there was still this lingering thing. It's like, he's a comedy guy as well. He can do light comedy, he can do that kind of caper movie. And I think some of this is just him still trying to find his slot as a leading man in Hollywood. Because, you know, he did Mortal Thoughts around this period as well, which again didn't land and which you thought would have done, because he had Bruce Willis, big star, Demi Moore coming off Ghost. You know, you thought, okay, that's going to be a big hit. That didn't land either. In Country didn't land. You know, there's a few misfires around this period where you're not quite sure what is his thing? What is his thing? You know, Arnie's a big star. Stallone does movies. You know, what is Bruce Willis's thing?
Yeah, it took a while to find it. I think I think it's only until about the third Die Hard. Is it? He's actually an action guy.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think also the Pulp Fiction as well.
Yeah.
I think it was okay. You can go from doing slightly more highbrow acting roles in Pulp Fiction, and these silly action movies, I guess. But comedy drifted away, and he's not really done much comedy. The whole 9 yards, I guess. Early 2000s, but he's not really focused on that, which at the start of his career you would have thought would have been much more of a bigger part.
Yeah, which is why that if you look at any Bruce Willis interview nowadays, he looks so tired. He looks like he's so done. He looks like he's like, he's still thinking of the time, like, I was a musician once. I used to play the harmonica and it was the best time of my life. Why am I doing this bull? Red 2? Why am I doing Red 2?
Taxes need paying, and he has to do the tax movie.
He's one of those actors that doesn't play a character anymore. He just plays Bruce Willis now, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think he's just tired. It's a shame. But on that year, just going to do one brief notice. Speaking of musical movies in a weird way, Cool as Ice. Yeah. There was the Vanilla Ice movie. Clearly, this was on the hot. This. You know when it says like they're trying to capture a trend. This was hot. This was so hot. It was cool as ice, because at that time Vanilla Ice was kind of the weird one-hit wonder big thing. And so we're going to have to capture you quick. We're going to put you into a movie quickly, even if it doesn't at all suit you in any shape or form. And it's a weird sort of like romance, which is very peculiar. And it's and also the colors or the outfits are so gaudy and loud. It's kind of special to see him try.
Probably 91. You know, in that respect, you know, he's short of him wearing a shell suit. It pretty much embodies that kind of thing. But you also get that kind of music movie with Vanilla Ice. You've had it with Prince, and then we get it later on with like Glitter with Mariah Carey and Crossroads with Britney Spears. You get those movies periodically.
I think what it's almost trying to say, the Razzies are trying to say, is pop stars, stay in your lane. Don't make movies. You do the music thing because you're good at that. No, movies ain't your thing. Go away.
How dare you have ambitions beyond your station? Arguably, 91 is probably the last year where you get those kind of sort of like odd, eccentric, odd movies. I can't explain them any better. After that, you start getting much more punching at Hollywood stars. You get the Shining Through, Melanie Griffith being nominated and winning. You know, you've got The Bodyguard, massive success, terrible movie. Yeah.
Again, it's all big studio stuff with big names in the lead, where the Razzies feel like they need to have a go.
And looking back before, Whitney Houston, pop star, stop getting into movies, you.
Yeah.
And then after that, we start seeing another pattern that comes through in the bias of the Razzies. They don't like sex. They don't like it. Put them away. It's naughty. So throughout the 90s, we get Indecent Proposal, Demi Moore. We get Body of Evidence nominated in 1993. Madonna's movie. We get Slither, Sharon Stone's follow-up to Basic Instinct. 94, we get Color of Night winning, Bruce Willis again. We get Showgirls in
95. Yeah.
We get Striptease in 1996. It's one after the other. Every year, there is a movie that was sold on the sex angle, I guess.
Yeah, where its main focus is sex. Like, it is either like, here's a celebrity taking their bits out, or doing something about the sex industry, or being kinky, or anything. It's almost surprisingly conservative when you generally would think that something like the Razzies would almost, if it was supposed to be like praising bad films, would be embracing this and saying, hey,
celebrate that.
Yeah, Striptease, Showgirls, a classic with the... It's a pool sex scene that looks like they're having sex like a dolphin.
Yeah. The Showgirls has become has become that cult movie of the 90s, hasn't it? You know, that kind of, we've had documentaries about it with the You Don't Know Me, you know, we've had late night, midnight screenings of it for years and years and years. It's become the cult movie now. It's still a terrible movie.
It's terrible, but it's
terrible in an epic sense. You know,
it's quotable. Like there's one of my favorite lines is like everybody's got AIDS and shit. It's like, goodness gracious, where did that come from? Okay. Right, all right, we'll run with this. It's same realm as The Room and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Showgirls.
That's it. It's one of those terrible movies that's got an audience. There are people that love it and will come out to see it whenever it's shown. So,
why do we think Striptease hasn't got that audience? Because I love Striptease. I think maybe it's just not as bad a movie as people think. And I think basically it was sold on the Demi Moore Striptease bit.
Yeah. From a Razzie's point of view, that's another focused star kicker. It's let's have a go at Demi Moore, whereas Showgirls is more we're having a go at the subject matter and the fact that it's dreadful, you know, and it just doesn't work. And it's got all these strange lines and strange scenes in it. And there's more to sort of aim at there. There's more to aim at from a Razzie point of view, and there's more for an audience to sort of latch on to, I think. Whereas Striptease is much more sort of star focused.
I guess so. I think it's like looking at some of the ones from that bracket of the year from 1995 onwards, where you look at other big famously bad movies that are there, or at least famous flops like Waterworld is in there, The Island of Dr. Moreau, and all this kind of stuff. Those ones have some of these. Well, The Island of Dr. Moreau is a different thing, and that's on the list, by the way. So we are watching this, Ed. But Waterworld. Not really a bad movie. It's just famously just a flop because it costs so much.
Yeah.
But it's not quirky enough. It's not weird enough. I and Dr. Moreau, other than just the weird Buckethead situation, it's not really that weird. It could have been weirder.
Okay, so let's move on, because then we start getting into the category of big budget crazy movie flops now from like 97 onwards. We get like The Postman winning.
That goes where Waterworld didn't. You know,
exactly.
It's an achiever. It's a Razzie achiever. Yeah.
But you also get Batman and Robin that year, and that win.
Oh, there's a soft spot in my heart for Batman and Robin.
It's so bad. I mean, I came out of that movie being a big Batman fan. Came out of that movie and just thinking Batman's dead. They're never going to be able to resurrect Batman on the big screen ever.
Well, they did it for a while. They didn't do it for a long time. It wasn't
that long. It was like 5 years, 6 years, something like that, you know, which is an eternity.
That's a long time.
Nowadays. Back then, though, it was like, you know. And then they had to go the super urban gritty.
They had to clean off the sheen that was the camp on that movie. But again, Batman and Robin, we did an episode of that one, and we realized the reason why we like that movie is because if you watch it, because we remember it more like when we were a kid. When we were watching it on the VHS when we were like 10 and we're sitting there going like, oh my goodness, yay, there's Arnold Schwarzenegger. We don't care about the line. You know, there's Mr. Freeze's there. We know Poison Ivy's there, and everyone's jumping around in latex, and we just had a whale of a time. Looking back at it now, when you get older, you're going, oh, this is bad. But then if you just let all the flying colors of Joel Schumacher just take you over, it will be like a giant hug that's full of ice puns. About 27 ice puns, according to
I was 21 when I saw it. I mean, I'm like, no chance, mate. You got no leeway on this.
See, that's a difference.
The wrong age. Yeah.
Wrong age.
Yeah, the Joel Schumacher Batman films have aged very well, though, in terms of if you sort of mine and Johan's age, they're kind of like you go back and revisit the cheesy Batman films more than you do the gritty ones, in my opinion.
So moving on, we get Alan Smithy film winning the next year, which feels a bit weird.
Yeah, now that's strange because the other nominees again all look like shoe-ins.
Spice World was nominated and win.
Well, they hate pop stars. We've already established that. They hate pop stars.
Yeah.
But then Spice World should have won then.
Yeah. But then we get Godzilla as well.
So is the fact that wins against the competition there, is that a sort of anti-Hollywood, anti-movie business thing, or what's going on there?
I don't know. I think in a weird way, it's so. I think they're trying to remember what the Razzies meant, which was we're poking fun of Hollywood. We're poking fun of them, and we're saying like, you know, we have to remind us. It's almost like reminding everyone, hey, the glitz and glam of Hollywood don't exist. A lot, they also do rubbish too. They do trash as well. And I think that movie is just almost a way of just cementing the idea, I guess. Like, they do a lot of, like, representative nominations.
I think it was like, it's been a few years since we had Stallone nominated. What's he done this year? Oh, he's done this movie. Let's nominate him again. Yeah, let's stick the boot in. You know, it's been a good few years since Stallone's done a bad movie. That's nailing.
Quite a shame.
Yeah, he did that Copland film where he tried to act. Right, we're having him. How dare you try and act?
Oh no, poor Stallone.
He was great in that. Come on.
He was good. Copland was fantastic, but like, they don't like it. You get out of your lane again.
Stay in your box. Yeah.
Stay in your lane.
We like you making bad films. So.
Yeah. This is exactly what it is. Moving on to the next few years after that.
There's two really big. I mean, the next one, Wild Wild West one in 1999, which was Will Smith's first flop. He was a megastar. But I would argue that this movie doesn't flop because of Will Smith. It kind of flops in spite of the immense effort he is going to instill some sort of charisma and enjoyment and fun to this movie. It's not quite.
Oh, totally. I mean, the script is awful, but like Will Smith and Kevin Kline, they can make anything funny. So their performance is great, and it's got a lot of daft kind of jokes in that can kind of work as well. Will Smith like plays the bongos on a woman's boobs, thinking it's Kevin Kline in drag. And it's just got a lot of like really. I mean, Roger Ebert said it was like the special effects were like watching money burn before your eyes on screen. But I don't know. I revisited this one. This is one I did watch, and I had so much fun watching this movie. It kind of fits in that fun Wild West kind of period. Fits into like my memories of going to the American Adventure theme park in Derby. So it's kind of like. It's just that. I think that's why it's special to me, basically.
I think with this movie, the only thing I got out of this movie is, look, I like the movie, actually, in a weird way. It's not aged well for many reasons, but I like it. The only thing I would say is that this movie felt more like Will Smith was doing a favor for the director because the same director did Men in Black, right? Yeah. And it's like, oh, that was a hit. So it's when the director went over to him saying, hey, I'm going to try and adapt Wild Wild West, the TV show. I'm going to adapt it. I would love to have you on it, Will. You know you wanna. And Will sort of like, it's like, oh, I don't know. I mean, I was offered The Matrix. I mean, that could have been a thing for me, but then it's like, oh, come on, please, for your old pal, your buddy, you get to wear a cowboy hat, and it's like, sure, great, we'll run with it. And so it feels a little bit like this was more like him doing a favor and saying, oh, it worked with him. I worked with him last time. I made a great hit. It worked this time. It didn't. So it feels for me, even though I watch it, I do feel like it's a little hollow a bit because it's Will Smith.
It feels like this is where he's cashed in. It's like, in a sort of like, I've done Men in Black, it was a big hit. I've done Independence Day, it was a big hit. And now I'm taking that big $10 million paycheck or whatever the movie paid. I'm taking that. What you got for me? And we've got this movie. We're going to reteam you with Barry Sonnenfeld. We're going to make this movie. We're going to put Kevin Kline in, Salma Hayek. It's going to be fantastic, And I can see at that time, there was a lot of these sort of like big budget experience movies, where it was ridiculous effects. And this one, was just part of that run, I guess.
It has a giant spider in the third act.
I guess, and that's the thing. I mean, it's the steampunk thing.
Yeah, it brought steampunk into the mainstream. That's an important thing,
You say that, but I don't know. I'm a big fan of Kevin Smith. And so I know the story about the giant spider in the third act, because that was supposed to be in the failed Superman movie. And so it was the same producer. So the same producer was able to niggle to say, I really want a giant spider in the third act. And so again, this is why I feel like now that I know that story, that made that entire thing seem extra hollow, because it's just now it's no longer made for the fans. It's now made for this crazy ass producer who really just wants certain things done.
I don't know. I think with the Wild Wild West TV series, I don't think anyone in 1999 was sitting there thinking, "Oh, they're not being true to the spirit of the Wild Wild West TV show." From 30
this is
years
true.
Ago, I think it was just a weird. They went through a run of making these like rehashes of old TV series that ultimately the fan base was not the fan base that was going to watch the movies. Like the Avengers the previous year, as much as the fans of the Avengers were still alive, who watched it originally, and they hated this movie, but they weren't the people who were going to the cinema. They're not the people they're not the 18-year-olds, the 10 to 30-year-olds that Hollywood fed off. So, and to that audience, the Avengers, as the original British TV show Avengers, it meant nothing to them. It was a fresh concept. So this was a similar thing, I guess, but it just didn't land. It didn't land. And being in the same year being nominated in the same year as the Blair Witch Project was nominated as the worst movie, which is like, that's not aged well, has it, for him? The horror movie that sort of like revitalized horror in the late.
Yeah.
A lot, and that's why I feel like a lot of these are reactionary in some points. Like
Friday the 13th as well, the first Friday the 13th. So
as years have gone by, some of these movies have been reevaluated and said they're the best. I mean, we didn't mention it, but Scarface was nominated for one Razzie as worst director. Because at the time, everyone was very cynical, saying, actually, we don't like the violence, we don't like the sex, we don't like all the cocaine and drug stuff, we don't like all the fact that all the Cuban Americans seem to be looking like criminals, and so on and so forth.
And more importantly, they don't like Brian De Palma, because he gets nominated so much in the 80s. Dressed to Kill, Body Double, obviously the infamous Bonfire of the Vanities later on he was nominated for. They really don't like Brian De Palma, which immediately puts them against me because I love Brian De Palma. So, sorry.
Can I now just say, now we're going to 2000. Can we actually now talk about a bit more about John Travolta? Because in 2000, it's Battlefield Earth.
It is Battlefield Earth, yeah. Because Travolta's been nominated on and off throughout the 80s, in forgettable movies. His career path is one of ups and downs. And we're currently in a down, I think, but he will rise again. Like the Phoenix, he will rise again
and then fall down again.
The period where he was rising, and he'd really done Pulp Fiction, late 90s. He'd done in mid 90s. He'd done Get Shorty, which was a big hit.
Yeah,
so he was in a position of power again where he could control what he did.
But I think
so he did.
Even in 2000, I think we know it now about Travolta, but even as early as then, I think everybody sensed that he'd already got this sort of roller coaster career, and that he was on a downward spiral, and the mixture of that with the whole sort of Scientology angle of this movie would killed it from the start. Before the cameras started rolling, it was going to get a Razzie nomination, and then when we all saw it, I think it was a shoe-in as the winner. So,
yeah, totally agreed with that. Like I said, everything's a Dutch angle for some particular reason, which fascinates me. The fact that it is very much a Scientology, in a weird way, I'm not sure if it's supposed to be a Scientology propaganda movie or just a story based on L. Ron Hubbard pieces. But
I think the press and the Razzies and any other interested parties would tie those two things together, to make capital out of it. So
plus the same time as John Travolta in dreadlocks, so instant win.
Yeah, indeed.
Instant win. Yeah. So, swiftly, as I say, we've already talked about pop stars. We get Madonna nominated the next year. We get Britney Spears in Crossroads. And then we start getting into some fairly forgettable movies from now on, really. We get Giggly, which I think, Daryl, you watched. Is it Giggly?
Yeah, well, it's pronounced Gigli, and Ben Affleck makes a point in the film. This is one of the things that's so wrong with that movie. He's got this big thing in the film where he keeps telling people that my name's Gigli, it rhymes with really. And I'm thinking, no, it doesn't. Gigli does not rhyme with really, Ben. So, no, it's such a dreadful film. It just sort of lays there. There's no, I mean, this is like Hollywood's golden couple at the time, and they've got no on-screen charisma whatsoever, which makes you wonder what their charisma off-screen was like, because it's probably the same. Martin Brest, who was sort of, red hot, he was making a film every 3 or 4 years. Yeah. He'd done Beverly Hills Cop, he'd done Midnight Run, he'd done Scent of a Woman, Meet Joe Black. He's sort of hot by Hollywood standards, and he's sort of making films when he wants to, on his own terms. And he does this, and it's got the feel of something that could turn into Beverly Hills Cop or could turn into A Midnight Run, except for the fact that the whole point of the movie is that, unlike those films where you've got a sort of road movie element or sort of chase scenes in the streets and things like that, the whole point of this is that they're shut indoors for about 80% of the film. And it's not what Martin Brest does. There's a scene about 2/3 of the way through where they introduce a new character, and you think, oh, this is going to be interesting. This is going to send it all off on a whole new dynamic. And she comes on and she immediately slashes her wrists. And I'm thinking, I'm thinking, is she there as the audience identification figure?
There is one thing I know about the movie. I haven't seen it because, you know, I want to stay sane. But there is, I know there has one very questionable thing where the whole point of it is that Jennifer Lopez in this movie, that she's a lesbian. Ooh. But Ben Affleck being a straight man says, oh yeah, I could change you. So it's just, oh dear, that is extra questionable on top of that.
It's really queasy. It's even more sort of woolly and very, very sort of obscure, and they never really quite explain what's going on and whether it is. You're talking about it as though it's a traditional sort of the hunky male sort of turns the lesbian sort of thing. It's not actually like that, and I can't really say what it is like because people sort of say things to each other, and I'm thinking that's terrible dialogue. Have I just missed 3 lines? Have they torn 6 pages out of the script or something? And then I just don't know what happens in those scenes. And
it sounds like you're having a mental breakdown. I think you're having a breakdown. Breathe.
You've got to watch the film to sort of see it. And I mean, you're talking now as though it's all very sort of clear cut and it's all obvious what happens. If you saw the movie, you'd come away scratching your head about it. So, fantastic. Yeah, the whole sort of sexual orientation thing is just. I think Martin Brest sensed that this is going to be so difficult for me to handle that I'm just not going to bother. You know, it has got the feel that he didn't turn up for those 2 days. You know, and,
maybe it's one of those things where it's like we've seen Chasing Amy, and Ben Affleck plays a straight guy who gets involved with a lesbian in that one. So maybe that's Ben Affleck's thing. Maybe that's his star vehicle. He just lesbian straight. No, that's not a good one. That's not a good look, Ben.
Yeah. Indeed, it's not. No. Terrible film and a highly deserving winner. The clincher on that is, as I say, Martin Brest was one of Hollywood's sort of golden boys. It had been for 20 years. He hasn't worked since.
Oh my God, he hasn't.
Maybe that's a deliberate decision. Maybe he's punishing himself. Okay, so we move on to 2003, where we get, I guess this is the first time a Hollywood star turned up at the ceremony to collect her award.
This one's for Catwoman. This is secretly one of my favorite Razzie nominations, and the reason why is not because the movie's great. The movie is campy as all hell, and it's the whole point of having Sharon Stone becoming literally rock hard by wearing makeup. That we're not going to talk into that deliberate situation, or the fact that or the fact that Catwoman becomes Catwoman because Halle Berry dies by falling out of a sewer and then gets revived by mystical Egyptian cats. That's a thing, but. It's the first time ever that an actress or anyone really actually bothered to show up to the thing
and collect their Razzie.
And on top of that, gave them both, like, say, look, and gave them, I would argue, the speech, which is a great 8-minute, 10-minute speech. If you haven't watched it, watch it. Where for the first 4 minutes, she's literally poking the fun out of the movie and doing it in a very mocking way, like very funny, just very what the Razzies want, right? And then the other 4 minutes is her being humble and saying, like, actually, my mum rose me up, and she told me that the only way to be a good winner is to also be a good loser, where you have to get criticism, understand them, and grow. You don't be a sourpuss, basically. She's literally coming in to hear, and she goes over and says, like, well, actually, I respect your feedback. But then at the very end, she goes and says, and I pray to God I never have to come into this dumpster fire again and just walks off feeling proud. Well done, Halle Berry. Well done.
She also names and shames like a lot of other people responsible as well. Like in the film, she does a shout out for everyone, like the director. She's like goes, I don't know what you were saying, but because he's like he was French, wasn't he, the director? I never knew what you were saying. Yeah.
One name. Also just one name because he's so special. It brings like, oh, here's my agent. She brings her agent out and says like, next time, tell me nice, tell me not to accept every script and stuff like that. It's brilliant.
I quite like it. I'm going to throw in there. I quite like it. I mean, it's terrible, and it's a movie in search of a character. You know, her character is that she's really attractive.
They make this film called Catwoman, and they really, 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 really go out of their way to prevent it from being the Catwoman that we're all expecting from Batman. You know, there are absolutely no links in the movie.
They're not even in Gotham.
No.
I think it looks fantastic.
The director's sort of known for that. He'd made a great film called Vidocq in France with Gérard Depardieu about 5 years before, which is fabulous, visually extraordinary. And this has got a lot of the same sort of look to it. But the characters and the plot's so cliched. As you say, it's got these extraordinary things about sewer pipes and this bizarre makeup concoction and things, you know, and the cats. What it has got is it's got Frances Conroy, and she seems to make a speciality of giving really, really great performances in really terrible movies. And then you've got Sharon Stone, who just sort of really tries to drag the whole thing up by the bootstraps and is fabulous. But yeah, other than that, it did nothing for me. And the main thing is, it's not Catwoman. It's a Catwoman.
It's a Catwoman, and one that really likes catnip, which is one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. That's so terrible.
She just the sniffing of the catnip, going around going, that's catnip. And just like, oh no. It's so good. Oh, it's so good.
I mean, yeah, let's move on. Otherwise, we're just going to start talking about catnip over and over again. Let's move on. Let's move on, because after this, is there anything else that stands out as a particularly interesting nomination or win?
Can I just say, this is the fall. This is we start really seeing the fall of M. Night Shyamalan. You're seeing a pattern here. Yep. For example, you get to see, you got The Lady in the Water in 2006, which is literally just an FU to all the critics anyway. So this is perfect. It then goes into The Happening, which becomes very, very clear as well. And it's not, which I'm surprised didn't win. Really, I think The Happening is one of those movies that now it's become so bad is good. You watch it, you get confused. It's Mark Wahlberg, it's Mark Wahlberg talking to plants, so you can't say no to that. And then later on, we've got then the last Airbender, and you can really start to see by this point is like we're not even entirely sure whether it's just poking fun because it's M. Night Shyamalan or whether because those are terrible movies. I would argue they're actually because they're just really bad, sadly.
Yeah, I mean, I think The Happening didn't win because The Love Guru is so uniquely positioned to be the Razzie winner that year. The Love Guru, it's the first movie he's made in a few years, you know, since the Austin Powers booms, and nobody likes Mike Myers in Hollywood, you know.
It is a let's kick Mike Myers. Yeah, that's the year. Yeah. And there's another Shyamalan title later on in After Earth. So yeah, four nominees in a few years. But he's one of my most hated people in Hollywood anyway. I don't even like the films that everybody liked. I hate Unbreakable. I hate The Sixth Sense. So for me, they ought to have been Razzie nominated too. But wow. So I'm so glad to see that his career has gone on this incredible downturn.
Are you officially a panelist for the Razzies now? Is this what you're trying to say to us?
I wish I was, because he'd be on there every year. So
wow.
We also see them dipping down into the independent scene, into the lower budget scene, with a couple of nominations for Uwe Boll during this.
Yeah.
Uwe Boll,
although I think the thing with Boll is he sort of self-promoted himself into contention. It's almost like somebody pitching for an Oscar. He's pitching for a Razzie.
Yeah. He wants to be recognized. In this case, he wants to be recognized as being the worst, basically. And, because it was a whole thing for him for the longest time. There was one time he actually he asked his critics to get into a boxing ring so he can punch their lights out. So he's famously known for being, well, a bit of a dick. So being in the Razzies just is up his street. It makes sense to me.
I think one of the things that have occurred to me is that they don't really nominate kids movies apart from the odd one here and there. They don't regularly nominate in movies, and most kids movies are terrible. It's just as part of the general genre.
I kind of think maybe because it's like, oh, it's designed for kids kind of situation, and which I think again is like punching the bar too low.
Movies on a different level as well. They appreciate the different things than sane people in many cases. So like the Emoji Movie winning feels like, I don't know. It feels like you're punching at a.
It is. It's a low target. I mean, something like Mac and Me back in the 80s is a different matter because I think that's not being nominated because it's a bad kids movie. There's a whole other agenda about that. So,
I mean, the Emoji Movie has Sir Patrick Stewart as a talking poop. So you can't not feel a little something for that.
My son loved it when he saw it. He just because it follows a plot of most kids movies. The journey plot and saving the day and becoming friends with people again. That's and roll credits.
Yeah,
and it hits all those things and with lots of product placement as well. So it's exactly a perfect Hollywood kids movie. And then so that stands out for me. And Gotti, again, we get the return of John Travolta. In the last couple of years, we've had Gotti and the spectacular.
The golden goose of his terrible performance.
Just when you think Razzies have got nothing left to offer, John Travolta says, "Hold my beer," and he jumps in with both feet. And Nicolas Cage didn't get a nomination for Army of One a couple of years ago, which was a similarly out there thing. But John Travolta goes full length with the Fanatic. I assume everyone's seen the Fanatic.
Yeah.
I have. It's wonderful. It is all the wrong choices in a movie.
Yeah.
It's also not only all the wrong choices, but powered by someone who'd never really directed a movie before, who's already has been in one industry and wants to try and kick his way out of there. Fred Durst directed a movie.
No. I will take it. He's directed more than this. He's directed 3 or 4 movies now. Fred Durst, lead singer of Limp Bizkit, has got enough movies under his belt to legitimately say he's a movie director.
To say he's an auteur.
Well, he's definitely an auteur in the sense that, auteurs have distinctive things that make their movies feel like only they could have made them.
To me,
then he is.
Well, the moment I kind of not gave up, but the moment I said like, oh boy, I'm in for a treat, is when they're driving the car in the Fanatic, and then suddenly Limp Bizkit turns on, and he's talking to the kid who's never heard Limp Bizkit because Limp Bizkit are flipping ancient now, and no one would know about them. And then you got the dad driving around going, "Hey, listen, Limp Bizkit, this is awesome." He's singing along to Limp Bizkit song, going like, Freddie, buddy, stop it.
You want to think that that's irony, but nothing else in the movie.
No, it ain't irony. It ain't. No, there's. Travolta's performance though is spectacular. We've got to say that the Fanatic didn't actually win the Razzie for picture. Travolta won for worst actor. Cats was the picture winner, but the Fanatic's more interesting to talk about.
This is true.
I mean, it's basically the standard sort of Stan type plot. And presumably Durst had sort of been through something like this, where you've got this sort of obsessed autistic fan who's sort of on your doorstep every hour of every day. Yeah, Travolta's haircut is extraordinary. His dress sense is extraordinary. So Travolta's playing this weird haircutted, weird shirted, stuttering, crazy fan. So you've got that element of the plot. He's got no social skills whatsoever, and yet, he's got a couple of friends. How?
Hot teenage friends, I would like to say, not just this 50-year-old man with no social skills, so friends creepy. With like lots of really attractive 20-somethings.
If he was just mates with comic book guy, which appears to be the case, that'd be one thing. But teenage girl as his best friend. Very, very odd. But the crowning glory of Travolta's performance, and this is a guy who's got no social skills, can hardly have a conversation or talk to anyone. We suddenly find out that he's an entertainer on Hollywood Boulevard in the evenings, and his act consists of dressing up as a Victorian policeman, talking to, wearing a sort of twirly handlebar moustache, and talking to tourists about Jack the Ripper in the voice of Dick Van Dyke from Mary Poppins. And at one, his best line in that sort of Cockney guise is where he sort of looks past him and sort of goes, "Is that the Quine?"
What is even that? It's also just so there's multiple levels of his insanity with this. It's just the idea of how tone deaf everything is. Like anyone else, anyone in any production, I would argue, would have sat there and going, "That's tasteless, that's inappropriate, that's rubbish, that's everything." And so I'm glad, as a bad movie fan, that we've got one that I will say will stand the test of time and will be watched forever and ever, because looking at, like you mentioned it, looking at some of the ones from the last sort of 5 to 10 years, other than, let's say, a small handful, there's none that's going to live beyond just the note. No one's going to go back and watch movie 43. Right? No one's going to watch that. Is anyone going to really remember watching Battleship? No. But The Fanatic? Mwah! Gold.
In the Oscars over the years, we've talked about this on a couple of podcasts recently. You know, Rocky won in '76, but we're all saying, "Oh, should Taxi Driver have won? Should All the President's Men have won?" The Fanatic is like the Razzie version of that. It got beaten by Cats, and we're rooting for it and saying, "No, the Razzie's got it wrong. Fanatic should have been worst film." Now,
I think the most interesting thing about The Fanatic is the tone deaf thing stands up, but even like, if you're a fan of Fred Durst and you're watching this movie, there are people out there who are Limp Bizkit fans. You're watching that. This movie basically says, "Fuck you.
Yeah.
Fuck you, my fans. You're all weirdos. I've got loads of experience of all you weirdos coming up to me in comic book shops and music stores, and you're all weird and horrible, and you ought to die." That's literally what this movie's saying.
Yeah. Now, in a dramatic sense, in this film, then there's actually no one to root for, because we hate Travolta and we hate Devon Sawa, and there's so. What's the point of the film? There's these two characters going up against each other, and we don't like either of them.
Out of everything else from the last 10 years or so, there's not much anything that stands out. I feel like maybe it's because I don't know what it means. Are we saying that Hollywood's actually making better movies?
Yeah. Well, as we've mentioned, the biggie that the Razzies missed was The Room, and I think it just went under their radar. I don't think it sort of caught on as a bad film straight away, did it? And I think because of that, it wasn't publicised, and because they're a sort of year-on-year award like the Oscars, they missed it.
So we've galloped through the history of the whole shebang there. Is it worth it?
It's a bit of fun. It's and I like the fact, as Johan's been saying, it's great that the celebrities and the stars are sort of embracing it a little bit now, and they're sort of all in on the joke. I say, it's harmless. I like the fact that it's there. And again, as you said earlier, it's a sort of counter to the Oscars. It's as daft as the Oscars are, isn't it? I mean, if you're questioning whether we need the Razzies, you're questioning whether we need the Oscars, Adam.
I am questioning that. Wow. I am questioning whether we need the Oscars. I mean, as much as the cinema programmer in me says, "Shut up, Adam, keep quiet," because every January, February, we get a big boost of awareness and we get loads of ticket sales. The other side of me is saying, but most of these Oscar films that you've forgotten 2-3 years down the line, and invariably they're not the best movie of the year.
Yeah, the ones that are usually the best movies, or the ones that we remember, are nowhere near nominated as much, I think. They're the cult ones. They're the ones you go back to. They're the silly ones. They're the ones who never get nominated for anything. And they're the movies that you go back through your DVD collection and go, actually, I really like this little bit of silly trash. I love this. I prefer watching that over than whatever won Best Picture 4 years ago. That's probably dated terribly. Let's just go things like Crash, for example. I feel like now the Razzies should be re-evaluated in terms of, I think they need to restructure things a bit. They need to spice things up a bit. They're really hitting on the low bar. And I think they need to start either re-evaluating it or changing it so that it focuses on the really bad movies and the movies that are gathering a bit more interest rather than just going for easier targets or going for just what seems to just be, well, we're just going to say we're just going to follow along what the critics say. Be a little bit angsty. Be a little bit more adventurous. Introduce people to these terrible movies. Because if you can do that, wonderful. It'll make my job a hell of a lot easier. So
that's all well and good, but you know that their way of doing that would be to follow the Oscars and have 10 nominees again, which I'm not sure we want.
In terms of bad movie like awards, I would just love to watch one of like really bad cult movies. That's all I'm interested in.
I feel like if you were going to if this was supposed to be a bad movie award show, it needs to either be it needs to change in order to properly go for it.
The thing you seem to be suggesting there, Ed, is almost like a sort of a Sundance version of the Razzies.
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally.
Well, that'd be brilliant.
Because the thing is, these like cult movies, they do develop their own kind of audience, and they are respected in a way. So it would be good if they took notice of that kind of thing, you know.
I think it's one of those difficult things that a lot of these cult bad movies that we've been talking about take years to marinate.
This is true.
And it's not got quite the buzz of this year's worst
It's
movie.
not instant, is it? No.
Some come ready formed in like the Fanatic, you know what I mean? For us. Others take a few years to marinate.
You don't know if a bad movie is going to become a cult classic until about 5, maybe even 10 years down the line, when people are talking about it, when people rediscover it, when people just with a new mindset look at it and go like, this is going to be great. If we were going to do a proper bad movie cult thing, it would have been something that would be like, yeah, you can nominate now, but we've got to wait. You can go for about 5 to 10 years. Let's let it linger, and then you can be nominated. And then by that point, everyone in the cast and crew don't really care unless you're like Troll 2 or The Room that the cast are so embracing of it now, and they will just go on like road shows and do that kind of thing, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, I think then we've done it. 40 years of bad movies. I want to thank Ed and Johan for joining us on this
thanks guys.
trip. You made some of the heavy lifting a lot lighter.
I'm glad we helped.
Again, as ever, thank you, Daryl, for putting the same amount of care and attention into these movies that you put into the movies that we're talking about on a regular basis.
Into real movies.
Real movies.
Yeah. No, I've loved this. I think it's been a really good session. So.
And finally, I want to thank Quad and the BFI for supporting the Cinelit podcast. Sorry, guys, this month's been a bit bad one in the sense of the quality of movies. But it's all about broadening people's tastes and broadening people's experience of cinema, and how much broad does your taste need to be to embrace Howard the Duck, Catwoman, and The Fanatic. What a triple bill. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks' time. Take care.